Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you, Tanya, for being so flexible on the agenda. My name is Adarsh Menon. I work with Fireside Ventures. We're a consumer-focused VC, which means we back founders and who are building for the next set of India's loved consumer brands. I'd rather say that we stand on the shoulders of our rockstar founders who build the brands that India loves. And what I'll spend some time over the next 10, 15 minutes is basically to talk to all of you about how we see the Indian consumer landscape evolving over the next 5 to 10 years. And also some, I'd call it pattern recognition from some of our companies that are scaling very well, scaling very fast. And what's actually coming out is many new age consumer brands. We call them insurgent brands, or let's just call it new age consumer brands, actually are developing this very good pattern of discovering fast, proving repeats, and then scaling with a lot of discipline, right? So that's the sort of playbook that a lot of brands are now emerging on. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what is one key encouraging trend that we see. So what you see on the slide here is basically two sets of brands. So the brands that took birth in 2020, most of them used to take about 4 years to 5 years to get to a milestone of 100 crores. The best brands within that used to get to 100 crores in about 2 to 2.5 years. And they used to work with a capital efficiency of about 2.5x, right? Which means there is about 40 crores, they get to 100 crores, 2.5x. What we've started seeing now is that brands that have taken birth in 2023, which is 2 to 3 years back, are actually hitting this milestone of 100 crores in 1.5 to 2 years. And this is an average, which means brands are scaling to 100 crores a lot faster. And for a VC, what is even more encouraging is that this is happening with a capital efficiency of 3x, which means they need lesser money to get to 100 crores, right? So what we are seeing is with insurgent brands or with new age consumer brands, speed is shaking hands with discipline, and we love that. And now the next obvious question is, why is that happening? This is not a coincidence, right? Because you're talking of brands across various categories, brands that talk to various set of consumers, brands that have various different GTMs. Now, why we think this is happening, it's not a coincidence, is because there are several factors that are compounding and making this happen. We see that there is demographic change, that is a big tailwind. We see rising aspirations, that is another tailwind. We see digital ecosystems emerge that help these brands get here faster. And hence, this is pretty much the start of what we think will be a phenomenal decade or half a decade for new age consumer brands in India. So when we look at India at 2030, or in fact when we rather look back, we know that India's growth story in the last 5 years, 10 years, has not been investment-led, but rather consumption-led. But looking forward, what we see is that not just with the scale of consumption grow, India will actually witness several structural changes to how we consume. What is the kind of media we consume, what is the kind of brands we buy, what is the amount of money that we spend. There are some structural changes that are happening here, and hence the story going forward will not be production-based, but actually consumption-based, and hence a great opportunity for several new age brands to get built. Now, this is just some macro data that I'm sure all of us know. I'll just bring it together, which is that private consumption as a part of GDP in India is already very large, right? And going forward, this is projected to get even stronger. So where we are today, India is a $4 trillion economy. Private consumption is close to 2.4 trillion in that. 2030, we expect India's GDP to grow to 6.5 trillion and private consumption within that to 4 trillion, right? That's a CAGR of 10.8% projected for private consumption. Now, if you look at other markets, other large markets like China, USA, Japan, Germany, all of these are in the range of 1%, 1.5% to 4% growth, right? India is at 10.5% growth. So while the rest of the large economies in the world talk the language of stagnation or in some cases deceleration, the Indian consumer story is only likely to be a story of acceleration. And private consumption as a form of GDP will grow even faster. Now to put this number, this is a very good headline number, right? We think between 2025, 26 and 2030, India will add close to 1.5 trillion of incremental consumption. That is close to 300 billion every year. Now, $300 billion, just to put that in context, is the size of several mid-sized economies in the world. And that is just how much we think India will add every year incrementally in private consumption. So the good news for brand builders and for investors like us who invest behind those brands is no longer about whether consumption will grow or not. It is actually to dig deeper and say, where is this growth going to come from? Who's going to contribute to it? What is the mix going to be? And dig deeper and build brands and build propositions and understand how to scale those businesses, because certainly the growth is not a question. It is about who understands the shape of the growth and who builds well towards it. So we tried to diagnose this on where is the next 1.5 trillion of incremental consumption going to come from. And I must admit, we are creatively very, very challenged and constraints. So we put it down as the triple C of consumption. I'm sure many people in the audience can have a far better way to put this. So triple C basically is channels, consumers, and categories. And these are largely structurally platforms on which the shape of consumption is likely to change. So let me start with channels. So as most of us know, India is a predominantly general trade market. GT contributes to 80% of India's consumption today. Going forward, we are very certain that while GT will grow in absolute size, their contribution to the overall consumption pie will only reduce. By all means, GT themselves will modernize, which means they will start moving towards digitized procurement. They will start having digitized inventory systems, POS systems. Certainly, some of them will also move to open format stores, etc. But their share will certainly come down from 80% to 70%. Modern trade, which is big box stores, will grow their contribution for 30 to 17%. But the big jump here is actually digital commerce channels, which is e-commerce, quick commerce, even the brand.coms are likely to grow from 7% to 14%. Now the headline here is new age channels, which is digital commerce and modern trade, while contributing to only 20% of consumption today, will contribute to a whopping 40% of the growth going forward, right? So this is massively over-indexed with respect to their contribution today. What this means is that the shape of how brands can grow will change, because in the past or even today, big legacy incumbent FMCG brands have been built on the back of strong distribution, dominant presence on retail shelves. And this, by the way, was a moat for them, because for a new age brand, the brands that we back, getting into those channels is very difficult. This moat is certainly becoming weaker, because for a new age brand today, there are large digital ecosystems that are available through Meta, Google to build mental reach, and through multiple quick commerce and e-commerce channels to build physical reach. And hence, if in the past, strong distribution meant dominant presence on shelves, going forward, distribution actually will mean presence on screens. And the most important screen or the most important shelf going forward is actually the mobile phone, right? And hence, great news is that distribution moats will weaken and brand moats will actually become stronger. Moving on to the second C, which is consumers. Now, we think this consumption growth of 1.5 trillion will actually come from the growth of the consuming class. Now, we like to look at India as India 1, India 2, India 3. India 1 is what we call affluent and elite India. India 2 is Bharat, which is middle class India. And India 3 is the strugglers, right? We think India 1 and India 2 both will grow in size and together will contribute to pretty much the bulk of this 1.5 trillion of incremental consumption. Whereas India 3, we think is actually likely to become smaller, because many households in India 3 will start climbing up the income ladder and enter India 2. And hence, this growth in consumption will happen because the purchasing power in the market and the number of people who can purchase will just keep going up. And what we will see is increase in affluence, increase in aspiration, because people will have access to lifestyles which are best in class, increase in access thanks to e-commerce, thanks to logistics, and increase in affordability, because through UPI, through innovative payment solutions, through credit, more people will be able to buy. And now if you just look at what all this leads to in terms of categories, we see something very interesting happening, which is while demand is increasing, we also see massive fragmentation in the demand. Now, I spoke of India 1. Now, you can obviously segment India 1 even further into age groups. So you have Gen Zs, you have millennials, you have seniors, you have Gen Xs. We are actually seeing that Gen Zs, who all of us think are kids, actually in 2030, there will be several Gen Z parents, right? So that is emerging as a very interesting sub-cohort. Millennials, which will continue to be a very large part of the consumption basket, actually several millennials will actually become aging millennials by 2030. Now imagine what that will do to the shape of consumption. We see neo-affluent women becoming very dominant in the consumption story. We actually see the emergence of affluent seniors who are 60 plus, very well to do, also becoming very big consumers of goods and services going forward. Bharat, which basically is participating in the consumption story because of India's digital rails getting stronger, tell us that aspiration really has no zip code. So if you look at all of this, demand is fragmenting massively and several new categories have taken shape. So just to mention some of them: functional nutrition, derma beauty, mental wellness, design-led living. On the table, we were talking about GLP-1 related services. There is women's fertility, there is pain management, there is athleisure, there is better for you cookware, so many categories. Now the cool thing is, many of these categories did not even exist 5 years back. And we think going forward, some of the best loved brands in India will be in categories that did not exist 5 years back. Because the size or the day and age of one size fits all consumer brands is over. And brands that will become loved brands in the next 5 to 10 years will be brands that pick a specific cohort or niche and go very, very deep in solving for that cohort or that niche. And innovation in consumer will no longer be about improving a product or improving packaging. It will actually mean creation of new categories altogether. And that actually brings me to one brand I want to talk about, which is Moxie Beauty. I hope all of you guys have heard of Moxie, and I'm happy to see so many heads nodding in the audience and are consumers of Moxie. So Moxie plays in the hair care category, right? It's a massive category, 25,000 crores. But the absolute reality is, this category has been totally devoid of innovation. Now, 85% of Indian women have hair that is frizzy, that is curly, and that is wavy. Yet, 100% before Moxie, 100% of formulations of shampoos in India are made for women with straight hair. Right now, that is a massive gap right there. This is not a niche, by the way, right? When people say that these are niche brands, when 85% of the audience is left with products that are not meant for them, it's not a niche. It is a category in itself. And that is what Nikita and Anmol identified. So Nikita spent, in this case, she spent 18 months, close to 2 years, in deeply researching hair of Indian women, in working with cosmetic scientists to come up with formulations that are fully science-based, and by the way, not reformulated of imports that come in, and basically came up with a shampoo which is native to Indian hair, right? And what they've done as a result of that is built a brand that is defining the category of hair care for textured hair, right? Phenomenal discipline in the way they've executed, spent a lot of time on their D2C side first, then went on to quick commerce, went on to Nykaa. The business is unit economics positive. They've scaled to close to 100 crores in less than a year. Obviously, darling of many investors. But what it's taught us is what we think is niche actually is not really niche. You can go very, very deep and build categories within what we think is niche. Switching from hair care to a very different category, which is South Indian snacks. I hope you guys have heard of Sweet Karam coffee, right? So Sweet Karam coffee, it plays in the snacks category, massive category, 20,000 crores, growing fast. Now the question to ask is, snacks is basically just product that is fried inside a plastic bag, right? That is a snack. But there is this growing segment of Indians who want snacks which are better for you, right? No maida, no palm oil, no preservatives. That is what Sweet Karam coffee first introduced. You can argue again that it is still a better product inside a plastic bag, right? They scaled when they got someone called Janki Pati on board, who is the face of the brand. Janki Pati in Tamil means grandmother. So she was an 82-year-old grandmother. The CRO of the company, CRO here standing for Chief Recipe Officer, the face of the brand, the emotional moat of the brand, which is very difficult to do in a category like snacks, brings in that emotional loyalty as well. Again, very, very difficult to do in a category like snacks. The moment quick commerce in India started scaling, they jumped onto that brand wagon and scaled with quick commerce. Today, it's a brand that sells across every single nook and corner of the country. Why they sell is not because they're a better for you snack. They sell it because they're actually a cultural platform, right? They romanticize Tamil Nadu for anybody consuming the product in any part of India. And that's why Sweet Karam coffee today is a successful brand. Third brand, have you guys heard of Underneat? right? It's a brand started by Vimarsh and Kusha. So we didn't know much about this category in all honesty, right? This is shapewear. And before underneath, I didn't know what shapewear was. I thought there is innerwear and pretty much that's it. When we started studying the category, we realized that shapewear in India actually is a pretty massive category. But the category has two kinds of products. One is products that are available in hosiery stores, terrible quality, I want to say almost use and throw, that bad. Or for people who can afford it, there is Skims and there is Savage and so on, which they bring from abroad, which are expensive, good quality, but absolutely unsuited for women, for Indian women bodies and for Indian women conditions, right? Hence, enter underneath. So Kusha is not just the face of the brand. Kusha not just endorses the brand, but Kusha actually builds the product, builds the brand. And her community knows this. So her community for the longest time was the first and the largest distribution channel for the brand. And obviously because of the authenticity involved with how she talks about it, rewards her. Now the really cool thing they've done here is they've repositioned the category of shapewear from being one that was associated with hiding to something which is self-expression. That was associated with trying to hide what you have to express yourself with confidence. So they've repositioned the category as something which basically talks fully about body positivity, right? And in doing that, they've scaled. Now, a celebrity can give you trials, which is fair, but the reason underneath scales and does well and has gotten to 150 crores in less than a year is not because of trials. It's because the product is designed for Indian bodies. The product is designed for Indian weather conditions. It is a niche that is made for India and hence scales well and has actually taught us that just having a celebrity on a brand is not good enough. You need a very solid co-founder operator who will run the business, who will work in the supply chain and deliver strong unit economics. I'll move on to my next brand, which is this brand called Escape Plan. Now we know that Indians are traveling more. That leads to more luggage, accessories being bought in the house. That leads to more suitcases being bought in the house. But we also know that India is an extremely diverse country. And different people associate different price points in their mind with luggage. And so what Escape Plan decided to do is actually not start one luggage brand, but actually become a house of brands for luggage. And also then decided that luggage is a category that needs to be sold in an omni-channel way, and hence have built an omni-channel luggage and travel platform where you can get luggage from 10,000 bucks to 2,000 bucks and all kinds of brands. And in doing that, they've basically said if you want to attack a diverse market with diverse products, don't choose one brand, go multi-brand right from day one. And I'll talk about the last example today, which is a brand called Happy Planet. Right now, this was a brand when they started. It's a brand which is chemical-free home care. They launched products which took on Surf Excel. They launched products which took on Vim. And guess what happened? Those products absolutely did not do well, right? And there was a question mark about what happens to the company from here on. Now, the obvious answer that most brands have is, let me put some more performance marketing and scale. What Happy Planet said is, sorry, we've got it wrong. Let me step back. Let me go and talk to my consumers and figure what they actually want. Today, the business is over 100 crores. 100% of the revenue comes from 3 categories, which did not exist when they launched. So they've got this lime scale removing platform. They've got a hard water solution. Basically, they went to consumers and spoke to them and said, what are different parts of your house that need cleaning that you don't have a brand for? And they've launched products and categories there. So extreme example of humility to say I've got it wrong, an extreme example of agility to fully turn around the ship when they realize that the ship is heading towards a dead end, right? So some of the learnings that we've gotten here is, your community is actually not your audience. They are very important infrastructure for you. They co-build with you, they iterate with you, they give you feedback. They, by the way, defend you when it comes to talking well about you. They are actually your biggest endorsers. The second one is a bit of a shameless plug, which is obviously if there is good product market fit, then venture capital can come and fuel that organic fire and take a brand, give a brand wings. I love the third part, which is feedback velocity, and that's a Happy Planet example, which is every piece of consumer feedback, and especially if it is bad feedback, needs to land up at the founder's desk on day one, needs to go to the product team by that afternoon, and iteration has to happen accordingly. And that agility is very important for Insurgent brands to scale. We all know that creators today drive far more qualified conversions as compared to mass media, where you actually might be ending up spending a lot more, but you get much better conversions with creators who specialize in a niche. Social is a new R&D department, which means anything that is topical, a brand should take and make it into an SKU. Any community request that comes should become a limited edition drop. Any consumer complaint that has come is actually a reason for a brand to iterate and improve. And lastly, because brands stay on their D2C websites for longer, there is just great consumer data, one-to-one data that is available that typically legacy brands do not have. And we've seen that these principles, these are not marketing principles, by the way, these are operating principles, help new age brands scale fast, build durable businesses, and turn what we call attention to affection to quality recurring revenue. That's all I had. Thank you very much.